And I'm just laying on the floor having this like come to Jesus moment. We're so conditioned in our society to think that something in the future, something outside of us will give us more, something that we don't already possess in our spiritual nature.
All of our goals can truly be achieved through ease and flow.
We've learned this like push faster, bigger, better, more. And it's come from a fear-based lack mentality.
I'm like, I can give you the business strategy, but you need to go kiteboarding or do something fun. I am so excited. I feel like I'm talking to Instagram right now because there are very few people, I'm a creator. And so I kind of get on and get off. And you are one of the very few people that I really just have so much respect and admiration for the work that you're doing in the world and the way that you're doing it, that I intentionally go to your feed to think, to see what's she doing these days, what's she creating, what's she doing in her life. So it's really an honor to have you here.
Thank you. What a gift. Such a treat.
Absolutely. Well, let's just dig in. What I really want to know is, who is Alyssa? Like, what are you doing in the world? If somebody met you at a party and said, what do you do? What are you doing in the world? And then I really want to hear the story behind how you got there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I am the founder of a coaching institute where we train and certify coaches of all different types of niches. I used to be a licensed psychotherapist turned coach. For me, a real healing is a change of behavior. So I love the deep dive transformational work, but how does that really practically and actionably shift somebody's life? And so I marry some of the two, transformation and strategy. And how I came there was as a therapist, because coaching really wasn't that popular. I've been doing this work 20 years this year. So it wasn't.
Sorry, you look like you're 25. That's crazy.
I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah.
I mean, isn't it crazy at our age to say that we can say we've been doing anything for 20 years?
I know. It's kind of weird. And I get that feedback too. And I knew it even when I was 12, this was before I got into my career at 20. I knew in a young age that I wanted to be a healer, live in the redwoods, and I also wanted to do marketing and do stilettos and live in New York City.
I love that.
I didn't think that these two things were separate. And so I just kept following my desire and the aliveness, and really got that part of my life's work is about helping people live with an open heart and mind in a modern day world. And so I think we all have an intuitive instinct about like, what is that calling for us? And as we don't question it, we just keep following that aliveness, the next most intelligent step, it reveals itself to us. And the more random it is, the more kind of aligned it is, to our path. So I started doing psychotherapy and really doing spirituality and psychology, and then meeting it later on with performance-based, science-backed research. And so how do you blend all of it? And so part of the work just over the years have evolved into my own methodology, which every year we train and certify hundreds of coaches in.
Wow. Okay, we got to go for a girls' weekend. It's so rare to meet somebody that has both ends of the spectrum fully. And no wonder I'm stalking you on Instagram. That is my life, and that is my heart, and that is my work. It's like, it's both ends of the spectrum, and a little bit different for me, not really different, but that type A driven, like, let's perform, let's win, let's do all this stuff. But do it in the most like spiritually connected flow state, just all of that inside spirituality. And it's rare that women have those kind of parallels, they're usually one end of the spectrum or the other. And so I guess I just got all that from your Instagram because I feel it, sister. Like I
love it. It's amazing. And I talk about like Phoebe and Monica from Friends, that type A, get shit done, and smelly cat, spiritually connected, fluid, surrendered. Yeah. And I feel like more and more people are waking up to the value of that, of both. That it's because there's burnout when we're just this kind of get shit done mode. And there's also, it's not this, and it's not this, it's not totally cleansed. It's not totally open, but it's this surrendered action, this being in the world, high involvement, low attachment, and really sourced to a deeper truth of what you think the goal will give you, embodying that now and honoring the calling, still taking the step, because the entire process can be used to continue helping us evolve and awaken to who and what we already are.
Yes. Oh, yes. So I want to go back to what you said in the beginning. how you said, following, this is something I talk about all the time. I'm always saying, listen to the whisper, listen to the whisper. And, a lot of people ask me like, how in the world have you created this life? And I'm like, well, I just, was intuitive at a very young age, and something, and I think it was my mom's influence probably, but something taught me early on, or maybe I just knew that voice is never wrong. Your head can be screaming at you, your family and your friends and society. And you're like, this makes no sense, but I know it's where I need to go. I know it's what I need to do.
Yeah.
And when you heed that call, a life beyond your wildest dreams transpires. Like, it's crazy.
Yes.
So
I was just sharing yesterday with a friend how so I had a life in San Diego. I was going to college. I was getting my master's degree, was with this beautiful man. My whole life was in my mind planned out. I had a direction. And I started doing spiritual psychology, a master's program. So I was doing my overachiever archetype at the time, was doing 2 master's degrees at the same time.
Gosh.
And I was like, let me follow my heart. And there was something in my heart that was pulling me to move to Santa Monica, to leave my relationship that I thought I was going to get married, to leave the graduate program. And it made no sense to my head. And I remember sitting in my car in Santa Monica, my beat up Honda Prelude, crying my eyes out, like, what did I just do? And yet I couldn't not honor it. And the ways that my life has unfolded because of that, I could have never scripted. And so I love what you teach and what you speak to, the power of honoring this calling beyond any logic. It's like, it never leave us astray.
Never. And so I have full body goosebumps head to toe, because I was living in San Diego, living the dream. And I was like, I need to pick up and move across the country and move to Charleston, South Carolina. And everyone was like, what? Like, you have the life that we all want out here. Like, I just had this great life, and I was just, I knew I needed to go. There was a knowing, and it was very unknown what was on the other end. And so I too had that experience when I landed on the other coast, like, what in the world did I do? But I also told myself from kind of a rational standpoint, because the move was so irrational, the worst thing that can happen is it doesn't pan out and I move back, like, I want to be the girl that takes the chance. But how do you coach people through that? Like, it's a very hard thing to teach people how to walk through the fear, how to walk through the unknown. And, as you get older, it wasn't that hard. I mean, it was hard, but it wasn't as hard when I was 25 to do that as it would be at 45. So do you have anything to share in that regard?
Sure. Yeah. I feel like I like to give people experiments to test it rather than just trust it, so that they can run experiments in their own life. And I feel like most of us are intuitive, but we haven't really developed confidence in our intuition or an insight about how our intuition speaks to us. So 2 ways that I coach people are both helping them remove the fears, because that really blocks. It's like static on the line of our clarity. So as we clear the fears, the clouds part, and that clarity is just more obvious. So questioning the thoughts, moving through it somatically in your body. And I can speak to different ways that I would coach around that. So removing the fears and then highlighting and enhancing what already works. And there's different ways of knowing. There's different ways of intuition. So some people have a felt sense, a gut knowing, they hear things, they get visuals. And one thing that I share in my work with clients is an intuition journal. So just like a dream journal acts, you just put it by your bed for 7 days and you track the intuitive hits that you got that day. And then you write if it was accurate or not, if you have that information, and how you receive that information. So as you do that for 7 nights, you start to develop trust in, oh, I received it in this way and it did come true, or I don't know yet, but I'll follow back up with that. And it does. It's powerful and it's simple, and it helps you build trust in yourself. And then you take these smaller steps before moving to South Carolina. You make these smaller experiments where you're like, that worked out, and you're building that trust in yourself to then really lead your life from that place, that deeper knowing, rather than the fear-based mind that keeps us in our comfort zone. Because the mind tries to protect you by predicting the future, but it usually goes to worst case scenario.
Right.
And as we overcome that kind of fear-based thinking, we have more dominion over our life, and we embrace those parts of us that are scared, but we don't let them lead our business or our life.
Yeah. And then the coolest part like the coolest thing that happens, and I think you and I can speak to this, we've been doing it for so long that, you do it once or twice and it pans out well. You're like, it's never wrong. Like, this was such a crazy decision, yet look where it led me. And I think you just have a few of those experiences, and it's like the trust in your intuition goes from very little to, very high.
Yeah. And you have the tools to be with the parts that may still get scared to some degree.
Yes.
And then it doesn't take you out of the game. You just know how to work with it so that you keep moving forward.
Yes. Yes. And it's interesting because it seems like with time, living from that intuitive place and making decisions based on that, it's almost hard to relate sometimes to people that, because I say that because it's such a different world to live in, right?
Yeah.
Like living from that space versus not living from that space, but also realizing as we get older, and I'm guessing you're maybe 40. How old are you, Alyssa?
Yes.
Yeah.
30,
Okay.
39. Yeah.
39. Okay. And I'm 45. And so getting older as women, I think I'm starting to recognize how many people are our age that have really never lived from that place yet.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I find most helpful to create behavior change is having community, because there's something about your subconscious that sees that they did it and they're safe and they're okay. And it kind of gives us permission, or at least an example. So putting people in communities that are conscious, that are living a different way, helps your subconscious know that it's safe, and you start to lean into it, and you're encouraged by other friends who are willing to test it, willing to create a life that feels more aligned for them. So I feel like that's a fun and inspiring way to make the shift. So I think doing the inner work, transformational work, having strategies that feel aligned and intuitive, community, and just community, and taking responsibility for what it is you want to create.
It's so interesting you say community. I absolutely believe like your circle is everything, and you become what you surround yourself with. I always say cliches are cliches because they're always true, But I also was just thinking recently, I picked up some I'm always reading law of attraction stuff. And I always hesitate to even say those words because I feel like people are going to roll their eyes. And I'm like, it's like, there's so much science behind it. Right. And I geek out over the science behind it. But whenever I find myself immersing myself in, somebody's book that, they've devoted their life and they're writing all this, all these different philosophies around it, I experience it so much more. And so it's crazy. It's like whether you're in that interpersonal circle or whether you're flooding your mind with kind of this work, you start to tune into it so much more.
Frequency. And having that immersion as well helps really kickstart a shift. So anybody that's listening, it's like, if you want to help shift in a certain direction or a new direction, having that community, immersing yourself, at least in the beginning, I find is really helpful. And then to have integration, because a week-long retreat is beautiful. And that week-long retreat, or that whatever the thing is, and then having an integration for afterwards to keep maintaining those new mindset shifts or the manifestation, what you're calling in, is more sustainable to create change. It's a lot easier that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can't do it all on our own. It's like, I think when you step into a community and you realize how much easier that is, I can remember feeling like when I really stepped into the personal growth world and was kind of surrounded by that, I feel like I'm going downstream all of a sudden. And my whole life I've been paddling upstream alone, because I was always a little different. I can remember when I met my husband, we were probably 24 and it was New Year's Eve. And I was like, I'm going to go stay at a hotel room by myself so I can journal my goals and walk on the beach alone. And like, they're at a party downtown and they're like, what is she doing? So there's a lot of years where I was seeking that, but I was very lonesome, and it's such a harder road doing it that way.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be.
It does not need to be.
I love what you're sharing is like really tapping into a state of being and really tuning into your spiritual nature and being able to connect with that desire in the moment now, in your body now, while also strategically creating a goal. I think and sort of it's like feminine, masculine, intuitive, like the surrendered action, I think is even more powerful.
Yeah. I've been hearing that a lot recently. That's been coming up. Yes. And I love that. I want to go back to a word that you dropped a second ago. And I also want to bring it back to like, just maybe the average listener that's not really tapped into the worlds that you and I are tapped into.
Yeah.
So you said frequency.
Mhm.
And I, have learned and I know a lot about that, but will you speak on what you like a little bit more in depth when you say it's a certain frequency, kind of
Yeah.
what that means to you?
In relation to how did I share it specifically?
Well, you were saying, you tap into a different frequency or you're at a different frequency. And so you're connecting with
To
different
what's
things.
already
Yeah.
here. Yeah. When I was saying frequency specifically, so every thought has a different frequency. When we're in a lower state and a lower frequency, a lower mood, those thoughts have a lower vibrational set point. Whereas when you're inspired and elevated and in love, you're energetic. Everything is energy. Your body, your thoughts, everything is in alignment with a higher frequency. You get downloads, kind of awake. You open beyond the mind and have insights that come in. And so, with manifestation specifically, I think sometimes people want to call in something, but they're doing it from a place of lack, thinking that we're so conditioned in our society to think that something in the future, something outside of us will give us more, something that we don't already possess in our spiritual nature. And so helping people get their power back to tune into and question before I go looking for something, is it not already here?
Right.
And connecting with the energy of it already being here, whatever it's like, if I want the relationship to make me happy, can I experience the happiness now?
Yes.
Then we're not addicted or controlling or manipulative to the outer goal. And ironically, and we feel that happiness, and ironically, it's easier to attract a partner because we're in a state of happiness.
Right.
And we don't cling to that relationship to try to make us something that we're not already, like make us happy. And then it puts too much pressure on that relationship, besides just letting it flower and blossom into what it wants to be. So I used to be a couples therapist. So that was part of my work. But that's one example. It's like, okay, what do I think that goal will give me? Can I question those thoughts and experience those feelings now? And as I do that, I'm no longer attached to the goal. I'm happier. And I ironically, I sync up energetically to the frequency of what it would. It's almost like my experience is life gives me something better than I could have planned when I do that, but it doesn't look the way I thought it would. And so if I'm connected to, it needs to look this way, it makes it harder for me to actually to really see the blessing or the gift of what it is.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what blocks everybody, right? They're wanting these things. And I always say, you don't get what you want, you get what you are. It's like when we're in the want, we're actually keeping it away from us.
Yes.
And so just like you were saying so eloquently, you have to experience what you think is outside of you in the present moment if you ever want to draw it into you. And I remember it was not oh gosh, I'm blanking on. I always want to say Russell Brunson, Virgin Atlantic, Richard Branson, Richard Branson. I remember seeing a quote from him that it said something like, people think that I'm happy because I'm successful and wealthy. And he said, I'm successful and wealthy because I've always been happy. And like, that just hits it, right? It's like, you don't acquire, and I hate to use the word acquire, but you don't draw those things into your life from a negative state. It's almost impossible to. And it's a lot of the work that I do when, I'm working with coaches that are frustrated or just at their wits' end and burnt out. And I'm like, okay. And they think I'm going to like give them this business strategy, which I can do all day long. I'm like, I can give you the business strategy, but you need to go kiteboarding or do something fun, like take off this negative state and step into a different energetic state. And it's so freeing when for me, I feel like I know that, but it's for when I remember that, because when I'm in the angst and the drive and the type A and the burnout, I forget that I need to work more on my identity and who I'm being and how I'm showing up to the goal versus the work.
That's right.
I think is going to get me to the goal.
And my experience is that identity is everything.
Yeah.
So if I don't feel worthy of the goal, I will subconsciously sabotage it and not let myself, or I'll lose the weight, I'll lose the weight and then it'll yo-yo back, or I'll make the money and it'll have a set point, this unconscious upper limit, right? So the identity piece, I think, is so important, because if we don't do the inner work and inner work can look like a lot of different things. And we can talk about that, but if we don't do that inner work to either wake up to a stronger sense of self-worth or beyond any sense of self-worth, we will keep yo-yo and create these set points that don't actually let us receive and let it be easy, which is, I think, part of the deeper work that I learned with psychotherapy or with spirituality that meets some of the strategic world. Because you're right, strategy is really easy. It's like 20% of the work, whereas 80% is really inside.
Yeah, absolutely. And that all of our goals can truly be achieved through ease and flow. I mean, that's hard for me to wrap my head around, even though I'm saying it like I know it.
Yeah.
Because I am a, type A workaholic, go, 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 go. And there is a piece of me that also knows you have to show up and do the work, right? You can't just sit there and energetically be in flow state and have a Mercedes show up in your driveway. Like, you have to put one foot in front of the other and do that. But will you talk a little bit about that kind of, because I think it's such a struggle, and there's this anti-hustle culture, which I'm kind of anti-hustle culture, because, I think people are also now stepping into this, like, oh, you don't have to work. I'm like, there's a balance, people.
There is. Yeah. So I think we've learned this, like, push faster, bigger, better, more. And it's come from a fear-based lack mentality, I would say at the heart of it, society, we have a misunderstanding that I'm deficient, I am unworthy in some way. And so we look for ways to compensate to not feel that. We look for success. We look for the things to help us avoid it, essentially. And most of us have learned to create success or results in our life through hustling, and we push harder, more motivation. And I think, based on the coaching industry that I've seen, we've really been about behavior change in the beginning. People started waking up to mindset work. Then now the buzzword is embodiment work, somatic work. And one of my degrees is in clinical somatic psychotherapy. And I think that's beautiful, but we need an integrative model so that it's not pushing harder, but it's getting out of our own way. And some of what that can look like is, some people get really stuck in the mind, where they think being in their mind is safe. And so they really focus on the best strategy, and like, that's going to be the thing. Other people get lost in their emotions. They get scared, and that takes them out of the game. And you want to make sure that whatever the tools are that we're using, or if we're a coach that we're serving our clients with, we have an integrative method to really meet them where they need to be, both in helping see their wholeness, the truth of who they are. Because when we go deeper into the radiance, the perfection of our essence of who we really are, there's a piece that comes with that.
Yeah.
And from there, strategically, we can get out of our own way and still step forward to create what we want. So instead of needing to push harder, it's about letting go of the misunderstandings about who I think I am, right? We're talking about identity. So let me just share an example. So I had a woman that came to see me who wanted to make, I think her set point was like $200,000 or $250,000. And that's a lot of money, but she had been hiring all these coaches and like really type A, doing the work, and wasn't making progress. And so I asked her, what do you fear would happen if you made more money? And she's like, I don't fear anything. Like, why would you say that? That doesn't even make sense. I don't fear anything would happen. I was like, slow it down, because oftentimes the power is in the question, not the answer. So I just said, slow it down, get curious. If you were to make more than 250,000, you fear. And she started crying. And she realized when she was a child that her mother and her father got a divorce when her mom got a raise. And so she had subconsciously paired making more money with not having a strong marriage. And so part of the work for her getting out of her own way was about removing the blocks to that unconscious pairing. And she was able to create a strategy that these two parts were valuing something different, but she thought they were at war within herself. So some of this more surrendered path is about being mindful, is about looking at our operating system and getting into alignment so that then the strategy is a lot easier.
Yes, yes,
Doesn't
yes.
need to be pushing or making it harder. So
Yeah.
that's one angle to that equation.
Right.
The other one is about helping people just wake up to their wholeness, about who they are beyond what they achieve, realizing
Mhm.
they are priceless. And as they really get that, we have more aligned goals, and we don't override our bodies and push ourselves so hard.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And that's that was my path, and the interesting thing is I feel like through my success, I did gain confidence, right? I did gain like, oh, I can do really incredible things in the world. And so it's interesting to look back on my own path, because it was a lot of it was the success that I was driving to
Yeah.
that allowed me to see who I was, to see who
Yeah.
I was, and not all the insecurities.
Yeah.
But then I got to a point where I'm like, I don't need this at
Mhm.
all
Mhm.
to, be worthy or to
Yeah.
just be whole in myself. But I also sometimes wonder, would I have ever gotten there if I didn't have all the success,
Well, yes, I love that. So I think both paths, failure and success, can teach us about our
Mm,
worthiness,
true.
both our inherent worth and the capabilities of what we have. So there's something that comes with achieving something that we feel proud of ourselves, we feel capable, and that's
Yeah.
empowering for an egoic self. And then there's something also, my experience through suffering, that led me to discover my inherent worth and value.
Mm,
And ironically, that was through embracing the part of me that felt unworthy. It
mm,
was through embracing the part of me that was trying to achieve to be successful.
right.
So I had a situation where Deepak Chopra's, I guess, YouTube channel found me doing work as a coach and asked me to be on their channel. I was in my early 20s. I wasn't out there trying to look for PR. I was very confronted at the time of them coming into my office with two strangers. And they were like, as an achiever personality as well, being like,
Yeah.
perform magic. And I was paralyzed. And so I went upstairs into my daughter's room, and I remember they're setting up in my office, and there's like pink wallpaper, and I'm just laying on the floor having this like come to Jesus moment, being like, let me just feel all the things that I've been running from, because I
Yeah.
really thought that if I performed on that, then I would feel worthy. And I was so
Mm,
paralyzed by that thought that I was just like, I'm no longer willing to run from this feeling.
wow.
And I just sat there and I felt it. It took maybe 90 seconds. Neuroscientists has found that it only takes 90 seconds to feel an emotion. You don't have to wallow in it or indulge
Right.
in it. But I really just let myself feel that. And ironically, because I wasn't identified with the feeling of unworthiness, I wasn't judging it. I just, almost like a mother would to a child, like I would breathe into it and I gave
Yeah.
it a hug, like I welcomed it inside of me, and it passed. And it was
Wow.
such a gift that by the time I did the coaching sessions, I wasn't trying to prove my worth through it. And I invited them into what I had just given myself or experienced myself. The sessions were powerful, but I knew that who I was wasn't my performance, and that
Wow.
it was independent of it. And that was an
Yeah.
embodied, not just a knowing, because sometimes we know it.
Yeah.
And then other times we really feel it in our gut and we live that. And that was such a blessing for me. So I can totally appreciate like the achievement also giving us that, and then realizing we don't need it. And ironically, through sometimes suffering and embracing those parts of ourselves can also lead us to the same place.
You are giving me like major ahas here, because I'm seeing in your story, which is so powerful, that it's almost not whether you succeed or fail, it's whether you just try, right? Like when we are out there experimenting with things, putting one foot in front of the other. I mean, and your experience of just feeling the feelings is that, right? You go through, whether it's, I'm going to try to achieve this massive goal, or I'm going to, oh my gosh, I'm going to try to feel this feeling. It's like when we start to live out loud like that, and just instead of so trapped, I think that's when we step into our worth and we step into who we truly are, and we start to know who we really are, right? Instead of keeping ourselves at bay from ourselves.
Yeah,
And we realize like, it's not that bad. It's not that scary. It's not this,
that's right.
it's not the end of the world, whether I succeed or fail or feel it or not feel it. It just is.
Yeah.
And I think so many people are trapped in inaction or the inability to allow themselves to feel, the inability to do the work. And when you just kind of give yourself over to all of it, you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. And I'm not so bad, you
That's
know?
right. That's right. Yeah. It's like that fear grows stronger when we avoid it, like the voice of Oz. You know, you like pull the curtain, you're like, oh, that little thing.
Yeah.
And it somatically, like the embodiment work is really stretching the capacity to feel the range of our human experience as a sensation, not a story. And as we do that, it integrates into our nervous system. And just like you're saying, we realize it doesn't have power over us because we're not giving it our power by pushing it away. Ironically, pushing it feeds the fire of it. And so it grows. And then when we stop, the important piece to that, so that if somebody tries this, is that you want to have a level of presence and love and not do any work. If you had big T trauma, to do that with a trained trauma specialist, but there's a sense of love and presence. That's the foundation to stretching the capacity to feel those things. That does then no longer give them power over us. And we realize it's a feeling, not a fact. And it doesn't have power over you. And then we're not so afraid to fail because it doesn't mean anything. We've actually faced it and we're a lot more free.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh my gosh. This is so good. This is so good. So I want to hear more about just kind of the work that you're doing. I know you said you have this coach certification, school.
Yeah.
And so what does your day in and day out look like? Are you working with private clients? Are you working with groups? Are you training coaches? What does that look like?
Yeah, I train coaches. So we just graduated a group, our second large class of coaches. And so day to day in my life, specifically.
Yeah.
So we run the primary thing that we do is coaching and certifying these coaches in different niches. So part of the work is getting to the root, like why do people not create change and how do you actually help them create change at the root? And so we help them do that with themselves first, because if you really want to hold space for people, you have to you have to do the work. Yes. And then we help them do their own shadow work, feel more empowered, authentically and confidently learn tools to serve their clients, and then start or scale a business. Like those are the three things I find that need to thrive. And then I run a mastermind, private mastermind, and we're right now working on a few other projects. Part of my deeper intention is to help humanity heal. And I want to do a membership site. That's one of the projects we have coming up. I'm just seeing so many people suffering in the world. And I find that when they have the right tools and they have the community, so much can change. And when I was getting licensed as a therapist, I realized, why don't people know this stuff? And there's so much available. Yeah. So those are some of the things we're working on. But yeah, we're just in a growth phase and an expansion phase. And I feel like people need this work now more than ever. I feel really committed to the calling.
That's amazing. And just like you said, I felt that too. It's like when you kind of not stumble into, but when you start to really do the work and you start to just, learn these tools and techniques and processes, that it kind of feels like it's not rocket science, but I mean, there is a lot to it and there's so many layers and there's so many modalities, but when you start to find these things that just change everything for you, from suffering to it's not like, oh, I made a tiny little shift. It's like, I went from barely surviving my life to living, truly, I couldn't even wrap my head around the fact that life could be as good as it is, because unfortunately, I think we live in a society where most people are just trying to keep their head above water, right? They're just trying to get through the week to kind of numb out all weekend, to start it over on. And it's just, there are so many people suffering.
Yeah. And a lot of the time I used to say, I don't know how people do it without tools. And I do, because there's a lot of self-medicating. There's a lot of addiction, and it's innocently, there are ways that people are trying to cope, and there are just upgraded tools and ways. And as we each do the work, it makes this ripple effect, and we all get, however we're called to express that in the world does serve. And so we lead with ourselves first. And that is some of the frequency that we get to elevate and be that in the world. And then maybe we are called to, be a nurse or be whatever our profession or the work is that we're called to do, or parent amazing kids that are conscious. however that speaks to us, as long as we honor it and we live it first, I think that's what matters.
Well, you just touched on something that maybe we could kind of go into for a second before
Yeah.
we wrap. So you said you have children?
Yeah, I have
And-
3 stepchildren.
Okay.
Yeah, they're 17, 15 just Monday, and 13.
Wow. And
Yeah.
so what does this look like? Because mine are 12 and 14, and it's not a struggle to bring this work in. It's almost laughable, because what did my daughter say today? She said something like, in a funny, loving way, like, about manifesting, or no, she said something and she rephrased something and she goes, "Mom, aren't you impressed with my growth mindset?" She's 12. And I'm like, I am impressed with your growth mindset. And every child is so radically different, right?
Yeah.
So my daughter's very receptive. I mean, unless she's in a mood, she'll roll her eyes. But my son is like walls up, like, oh my gosh, he thinks it's all, hocus pocus.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm planting the seeds and one day you will realize.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
how do you bring this work into your family?
Well, my husband's ex-wife lives 10 houses away, and it's beautiful. The kids just get to walk back and forth, and it's very fluid, which took us a minute to get there. And it's a really beautiful dynamic. But the 3 of us, his ex, myself, and my husband, we all do this work. And so I feel like the more we live it, the less it needs to be spoken about. They watch
Absolutely.
it as an example. And, our oldest, I think, was really like, oh, my parents were psychologists, or, she was kind of like, no to it. And I see her asking questions and being open. So I feel like the more I live it and the less I talk about it, the more they'll lean in. And they also grew up very, lucky to have more of a emotionally and creative, intelligent school to talk about their feelings, things that I did not have growing up. So I feel like, and I think each of us, come in, like our youngest is so deep and already attuned without any of this. So, if the biggest thing that I found with parenting, and I would say for my husband too, is like, when I feel upset with, and I can talk more for my husband, I remember him doing some of the work where our son was really defiant with him, and he had to do his work with, my son should listen to me. Is it true? And as soon as he started shifting, and he's like, yes, I found a truth in that, but I also got to support our son in having agency and choice. And, the more that he didn't try to conform our son to be how he wanted, it gave him space to choose into a more loving path.
Yes.
I think kids are a PhD version to growth and evolution, but so are all relationships. Any intimate relationship is that closer mirror. So some people play it out in love and relationships, and others with their children. So I think my biased opinion is to shift me so that I come into alignment with all my relationships, kids included.
Yes.
And that it more easily invites them to do the work. And if they don't, I can still get free, even if they're not.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. They really are our greatest teachers, especially the more difficult ones.
Yep.
Like they are definitely our greatest teachers. I love that so much.
And it's like, if I resist resistance, it just gets bigger, right? So if I just allow them to be as they are, and there's going to be things that are non-negotiable, it's like that works or that doesn't, and there's consequences and choices, but without the internal drama about it, it's a lot easier. And, I also claim and own that I am a step parent. So and the way that I step parent is very, and every step parent's going to show up differently depending on how you've kind of bought into that system. So, but I think every relationship gives us an opportunity to see ourselves more fully.
Yes, absolutely. I always think about Byron Katie's work with, my son, especially. And it's like, and again, that goes back to what we're talking about, these processes, these things that we learn that we can just kind of pull up from our tool belt in a moment that shift everything for us. And it's like, why does everybody not have these tools?
I know. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm committed to sharing them.
Yeah. Well, tell me what's next for you. What's coming up? I know you talked a little bit about that with the membership, but we're going to hopefully drop this episode right before you have a big event. So can we talk about that?
So talking about the tools and making them available and accessible for people, we have a 5-day confidence and clients boot camp. So every day I'm going live, sharing a new tool to on different levels, somatic, emotional, mental, behavioral, mind, unconscious, so that people can not only get the tools, they get the training, they get the life coaching. I'm going to bring people up and unpack sessions, group exercises, all for free for 5 days, so that they can start to apply them on their own life. And whether they're doing it for their own personal development, for brand new coaches, seasoned professionals, it's about starting the new year off strong and really being able to apply it to themselves and then share it with their clients if they are service professionals. So that's a 5-day boot camp coming up, and it's free. And it's the most popular event of the year. People love this.
Wow. And is it in a Facebook group, private group? Where is it?
We're going to do it on Instagram Live, and we're
wow.
but we're sharing emails every day with new tools and doing away giving prizes every day as well. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that so much. Well,
So good.
hopefully we're dropping this on the right date, so it's going to follow right after that. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for your time. Thank you for connecting, and really just thank you for being the woman that you are and doing the work in the world that you're doing, because it is amazing.
I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful that there's a kinship and connection, and I really appreciate what you're sharing in the world as well. What an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much.